What's up, everyone? Welcome to Roman's Creative Academy. I'm Jay.
And I'm Mike. And today we're gonna be talking about how to vet buyers when assigning creative finance deals and cash deals.
So if you're new on the channel, me and Mike, we wholesale a lot of creative deals, but we also do cash. And what do we mean by wholesaling? That means that we find people who want to sell their home and we get it under contract, so we get a purchase and sale agreement. And then we decide whether we want to keep it for us or we want to find another investor who wants to buy it. And then we charge them a fee for basically taking over the rights of the contract, right?
Exactly. It's in its most simplest form. They're just paying us for a finder's fee. We found the deal, we structured it, we did all the heavy lifting because that's the biggest part is negotiating with the seller, getting it under contract, and then we handle everything from start to finish. But we just are offering a buyer who maybe doesn't have the time or the resources to be able to find the deals themselves. So they're paying us a fee for our services, which is basically presenting them with a good deal, helping them get it down the finish line to closing.
So in the time that we've been doing this, we've come across a lot of unethical situations that we kind of wanted to talk to you guys about and help you figure out with these tools that we use on how to find more buyers, right? And ethical buyers as well as...
Absolutely. So when it comes down to assigning deals, right, there's a couple things that you have to take into consideration. There's going to be times where you have a really hot deal, you put it out on different social media platforms, which is how we get rid of, or what we call dispo, all of our deals, right? And there's going to be people who offer you huge assignment fees. But just because they offered you a big assignment fee doesn't mean that they're a good buyer with proper intent, as well as do they know what they're doing, right? Because for me and Jay, we have an ethical obligation to the seller that we said we were going to get this done for them. And we're going to get it done the right way. So we have had instances in the past, and these are some things that we want you guys to look for, right? So when vetting a creative finance buyer, because that's with cash is cash. They're just bringing money to the table and then that's it. But with creative finance, there's a lot of things that go into it, right? So biggest thing that you want to do is when we have a form, right, and we have people submit offers to us, and once we have enough of offers, we call those buyers and we make sure we vet them, right? So a couple of the main things that we ask these buyers when they submit an offer is we hop on the phone with them, right? And then from there, we ask them some questions. And the first question I always ask is, Mr. Smith, I see that you submitted an offer. Thank you for doing that. I just want to ask you a couple questions to make sure we're on the same page. Now, first and foremost, I want to make sure that this deal, if you sign for it, this is for you. You're not looking to go in what we call daisy chain or look for another buyer and pass it down the line to make a fee for yourself as well, right? And I get that answer up front. If they stumble on their words, if they don't really give me a straight answer, then I kind of know what their intent is. If they say, yes, Mike, 100%, this deal is for me, I want this, I'm going to close on it, and I ask them again, so this deal you will be closing on for you, is that correct? And if they say yes, great, and we go on to the next question. The next question I ask them is, do you currently have an LLC open that you're going to be using to take down this deal? And if so, I'm going to need your LLC documents. So their articles of incorporation and their operating agreement. They both need to be signed, right? And the last...
So typically with articles of incorporation, the state has a stamp on it and you'll have a filing number. That's how you know that it was actually filed with the state and it is official, you know? And then in terms of the operating agreement, the reason that you want it signed is that there could be multiple members in the LLC. So making sure that it's signed by all members and that you know who's signing or whose role is what in the LLC is very important as well.
Absolutely. And then the last thing that we always ask them is, let's just say the seller needs $5,000 down. It's a $15,000 assignment fee, and then there's $5,000 in closing costs, right? How are you paying for the entry fee, what we call it, or the cash to close? Or is it liquid in cash in your bank account? Are you pulling it from a line of credit? Do you need to liquidate some investments that you have in the stock market? Or are you using a private lender? Wait to see what they say. If they say I'm using money in my account, I'm using a line of credit, then say no problem, I'll need a proof of funds just showing that you have that available balance in either your line of credit or in your bank account. That's it. If they say we're going to be using a private lender, this is where you as the quote-unquote wholesaler or the middleman need to do more due diligence. So people will say, oh, I'm going to be using a private lender, send me a proof of funds. Sometimes they send you a generic proof of funds, and the way that you can see that is if it's just a written statement or like it looks like an email or something just stating that, oh, XYZ has an allowable balance of this amount.
Or even just looking at the date of when it was generated. That
Correct.
little minute detail can really tell you a lot.
Absolutely. Proof of funds needs to be an available balance in either a bank account, if it's a line of credit, whatever, but you need to see that that proof of funds has sufficient funds to cover the entry. If they say it is a private lender that's going to be doing it, then what you need to say next is that, okay, no problem, we're going to need to have a three-way call with your private lender to make sure that they understand the type of deal this is, so I can ask them certain questions on how they're going to be getting that cash to the title company, and to make sure that we're all on the same page. If they say absolutely not, that's unacceptable, blah, 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 then that's a red flag for me off the bat, because if it's legitimate, they should have no problem hopping on a phone call, right? So I do want to get into a couple stories about some different situations that we have had. So story one is basically, it was maybe like a month ago or so, we had a buyer who sent us proof of funds, right? And he submitted this crazy assignment fee, so we got all excited, right? And his proof of funds was basically like a drafted proof of funds from a hard money lender, which was basically stating that Mr. Smith is approved for up to X amount of dollars. Typically with a creative deal, you have to send in cash. Another lender that is not an individual can't now send money to close on this property. It's just not how they operate. So we asked them, and I did some research, and it wound up being that this company funds for transactional purposes, meaning that if you're going to double close on something, they will lend you money for the entry fee or whatever it is for a day or two. So when I saw that, it automatically in my head knew that he was probably looking to reassign this to somebody else, which we actually don't allow. We have a clause in our assignment form stating that they're not allowed to do that. When I approached him about that, he ghosted me and he went away and he never came back. This is how you save your butt from not getting 30 days into something. You go to closing and you realize the whole deal just fell apart because you didn't do your due diligence.
And when you're doing this, you get like really excited. Maybe you got an offer, higher than what you were looking for, anything like that. But you really have to do your due diligence when you're, accepting offers. Make sure that you check everyone's story, which leads us into our next story that we wanted to talk about.
Absolutely. And this one, it actually turned out great. He's one of our VIP buyers, and he's an awesome guy. Love him. The first time we worked together, he had submitted an offer on a property. We hopped on the call, went through the whole nine, everything checked out. But he did say that he was having a private lender fund the deal. And I told him we have to do a three-way call. He said, sure, no problem. Private lender hopped on, and basically the questions that we asked the private lender were as follows. The first one was to just introduce myself, and I wanted to make sure he understood that this was a creative finance deal, not a cash deal, and that our buyer explained it to him properly, which was the case. He did. The second was I asked him, how are you paying for this, for the cash? Is it liquid in your bank account? Is it in an investment that you have to liquidate in the stock market? Is it in a line of credit? And he said, no, it's liquid in my bank account. So we asked him to send all of us proof of funds that he had the money, which he did, and he did have that money as well. And then lastly, I let him know that, look, regardless of who's purchasing the property, you are responsible to fund this, and without you, we can't get this across the table. So when you send in your EMD, which we always require 50% of the assignment fee, no matter how big it is, up front, that if you decide that you get cold feet, you want to back out, you will not receive that earnest money deposit back again. And I made sure that he knew that up front. You can skim through all this just because you feel like you want to get the deal done, but if you don't ask this stuff up front, you will regret it later on down the road. And everything worked out great. The deal closed, he funded it, no issues. And that is because up front, we recognized the questions we needed to ask. We made sure everybody was on the same page, and it put everybody at ease, not wondering the unknown.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Since you're basically mostly the one that talks to both the sellers and the buyers when we are wholesaling it, what is the difference between the tone of voice that you use between a seller and a buyer?
So when it comes to talking with the seller, you need to match their tone, their pace, their intellectual level. When you're negotiating with a seller, it's about solving their problem, right? So you need to be warm, you need to be welcoming, you need to be comforting, right? When it comes to a buyer, business is strictly business. There's no fluff, there's no matching the pace or the tone. It does not matter. We're here to do business together. We're here to get this deal done, and you're buying this property. So I am as blunt as I can possibly be, so there is not 1 ounce of gray area where people don't understand what we're doing. And that's the difference between a seller and a buyer. As the seller, like I said, you need to be comforting, you need to be warm, and you need to make sure that they feel safe with you. With a buyer, not that we're rude or we're aggressive, but we are blunt, straight to the point, no fluff.
And then to piggyback off of that is that when we do receive offers, we don't accept them as official offers until we get those 3 things, right? So until we get their operating agreement, until we get their articles of incorporation, until we get their proof of funds, we do not accept an offer until we see all of those items.
Everything has to be in front of us, because somebody could submit a good offer, but if they can't produce the things we're asking them for, then we write their offer off. That's it, right? If a buyer gives us an average offer, but they can produce everything for us, they cooperate, they're legitimate, all day long, I'd rather take a $5,000 cut from the highest offer to work with somebody who I can trust and know that the deal's going to get done and we can all sleep at night.
I want to throw it back to a buyer that we had that I just thought about, where he wanted to self-perform. Do you remember this one?
I do. So, when you are doing a creative finance deal, you have a process as your company with your documents, with your attorney, the way that you presented it to the seller, that the way that this was going to close. And you have an obligation to not only make sure that the buyer's protected, but the seller is too. Now, we're going to get a little deep with this, so just bear with us. But what Jay meant by self-perform is he didn't want to use a title company. He didn't want to use an attorney. He wanted to put all of his own documents together, have everybody sign, and then send the money right to the seller for their cash to close, and then send us our fee directly to us once everything was signed. That is...
What is wrong with that?
Biggest thing that's wrong with that is, 1, there's no note and mortgage that could be created. 2, we're relying on the buyer to record all these documents with the city, the county, the state, whatever it may be, and we're just putting it in their hands. And then lastly, he or she can sign for the deal, the seller can sign, and then can go totally ghost. They just signed their house over. The money, technically the house is now closed because there's ink on it, and the money was supposed to be sent from party A to party B, right? But there's no protection there. With a title company, an escrow, or a lawyer, whoever you use, whatever your state you're in, right? There's that middle person. The title company, the attorney, won't close until they have all the documents and they have the funds. And if they don't receive the funds, the deal is not closed. And then the title company will send us our assignment fee, will send the seller their money, the whole 9, right? And do everything that they have to do. You always use a title company or an attorney to protect yourself and the seller and obviously the buyer as well, because it's very important. Everybody needs to be safe. Now, some people will be okay with that. Our company standard is we do not allow that, because again, as a moral obligation to the seller, we have to make sure everybody's protected.
Yeah, so when we hear self-perform, that's automatically a red flag for us. And we typically, need that out, let them know, hey, we don't really accept that in our company. Are you okay moving forward with still using a title company?
Yep, and we say, if you would like to work with us, we will be using a title company, we will be using our closing documents, and we will make sure that this gets across the table, but I want to make sure that you're comfortable with that and you understand. And if they say no, then we shake hands and we walk away. If they say yes, then we go on to the next stage.
Yeah. And I want to talk about a seller financing deal. So because typically the entry fee, yeah, we can cover it, but you also want to ensure that this person can make the monthly payments, even in a sub-2 deal, make the monthly payments. So what's something else that typically when we vet, we kind of talk about a little bit, kind of bring out with their rapport? Do you remember?
I'll let you run with it.
It's what do they do for a living? Can they afford this house? Or is it just something that's going to be,
Or what is their exit strategy, really?
Correct.
So what do you plan to do with the property? Do you plan to rent it out? Do you plan to use it as just a personal residence? If you plan to use it as a personal residence, that means that they're going to be fully responsible for it. Do they have the income to afford that payment so it doesn't get foreclosed on and go into a whirlwind of problems for the seller? If they plan to rent it out, lease option, maybe wrap it, that's cool. Somebody else is going to be paying that mortgage, so regardless, at the end of the day, the payments will be made.
So that's just something else to keep in mind, think about, and have a conversation with your buyer about. Because, like Mike said, he's very transparent with our sellers, but he's also very straightforward, transparent, and blunt with our buyers. Do you have any final words for everyone with the dispo side of things?
I don't. I feel like we went over everything. Guys, it's just, it's great money. It's a great business model to do this, and you help a lot of people, a lot of sellers. You give buyers great deals, and it's very rewarding. But you also need to make sure that you're not just skipping through the whole process and you're rushing it down the line, because at the end of the day, we have seen it time and time again where we used to not do this stuff and there was always a lot of problems when we got to closing. So now instilling this, our full close rate is at almost 100%. Yeah. So
don't allow your emotions get excited or boggled down. This is still business. Business is business, and you want to make sure that everyone is protected, everyone's on the same page, and trust us, you'll get to the closing much smoother to the finish line than you ever thought if it's just up front with everyone.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, we hope you guys have a great rest of your day whenever you're watching this, and we'll see you next week.
Stay tuned for our next video.
Bye, guys.